What's going on, Imperials? It's Emperor Cubone here. The Galar region was the first one we've seen on the Nintendo Switch, which to many meant high expectations. And I will say that some of them delivered, and I enjoyed playing through Sword and Shield. However, there were also a few problematic aspects. To some, they were pretty glaring stains on the franchise as a whole. I don't know that it was all bad, like some people say, but there are definitely facets that hampered our enjoyment of the experience. And, as just a refresher, these critiques will primarily be coming from the standpoint of being within the Galar region in everyday life, as if we actually lived there. Meaning we'll be looking for in-universe explanations for why these grievances don't make sense. And I thought about including the expansion pass, but it'll be a while before that's done, and will likely have its own set of problems. And, just so we're clear, before anybody calls me a whiner and says that I should stop hating on Gen 8 and just enjoy the game, I've done this for literally every region out there, so this is not just a Sword and Shield thing. That being said, here are my top 6 Pokemon problems with the Galar region. Number 6. Team Yell. Okay, I'm not going to spend a huge chunk of time on this one because I've made my thoughts known elsewhere, and in short, they're not kind. This is by far the worst evil team I've ever seen to date. Their only goal is to cheer on one kid from their hometown? I mean, Marnie is super cute, but the lack of self-control on display here is truly staggering. And despite claiming to be doing everything for her, they don't even listen to Marnie when she tells them to stop. They're just a worse Team Skull in every possible way. They even share the same not the real evil team trope. Except this time, even though we know these hooligans can't be the main threat, we don't see what we're really up against until the 11th hour and we're basically done. At least the Aether Foundation was telegraphed from the beginning. And before anyone even tries to say, "Oh, but you don't understand, that's just how real-life football fans are." Yeah, I know. Believe it or not, you can know the origins of something and still think it's stupid. And if a reflection of my country were used to perpetuate stereotypes of belligerent mega fans resorting to violence, I'd probably be a little upset. Team Yell has the thinnest of motivations to even be in your way, and take up way too much of your time for how important they actually turn out to be. Not to mention the fact that they ruined the regional forms of the Zigzagoon family just so they could have a Pokemon that tied in with their punk image only solidifies that these youths are screaming into the void without anything worthwhile to say. Number 5. Giganta Maxing. Plenty of people have a problem with Dynamaxing. I'm not too keen on the whole thing myself, but that's more from a gameplay perspective. As far as living in the universe itself, I guess I can see how some strange energy fields can make any and all Pokemon into giants. I guess. Although why are they all the same size? Shouldn't they maintain relative proportions to their standard heights and... You know what, that's for another time. What doesn't make as much sense is Gigantamaxing. This phenomenon not only gives the Pokemon incredible stature, but also changes their physical form, quite drastically in some cases. So what's the deal here? Gigantamaxing is using these same mysterious forces that allow Dynamaxing, but they're interacting with the Pokemon differently. Even Pokemon from the same species don't behave the same when exposed to this energy. Some just Dynamax like regular, and others get a skyscraper-sized mega replacement. What makes them different? Is it just that they live in dens, and that exposes them to more of the energy? If that's the case, shouldn't I be able to camp out there with my Pokemon and let them soak up that energy too? Now, apparently we will be able to train Pokemon to Gigantamax in the Isle of Armor, but if that's the case, why can't I do it now? I would think giving out enough of this Dynamax candy should be able to evoke some kind of change. None of the Gigantamax forms even actually change types, like Megas or regional variants. So what's the need for such drastic physical alterations if nothing is fundamentally changing from regular Dynamaxing? Sure, they come with their own unique max move, but does that really seem enough to warrant adding a bunch of extra spikes? I feel like we should know a lot more about this phenomenon, since Professor Magnolia allegedly has this as her area of study. I can only hope that this was a late career transition, because if this has been her lifelong endeavor, and we still don't know why certain Pokemon of the same species react differently to Galar particles, then she's even worse at her job than Oak is. Number 4. The Gym Challenge. Now, I will say the Gym Challenge was a pretty good idea. Placing an even greater emphasis on facing the gyms by turning it into a national sport would be thrilling. And indeed, it did feel empowering when entering the arena like a hero. Oh, and the tournament-style fighting at the end was a brilliant touch. I was always jealous of Ash being able to do that, with nothing equal to it in the game's story. The opening ceremony was nice too, I suppose, but after we met all of the gym leaders and kicked things off, it kind of fell apart. See, in other regions you can challenge the gym leaders up to a certain point, but might get blocked by HMs that need to be used. Well, in Galar, we don't have those, so the only roadblocks that we would face are artificial. I can go pretty much anywhere I want with relative ease, especially with the fancy new railway to multiple gyms. So how come I have to start in one spot? And furthermore, how does Milo feel about knowing that he's the worst one around? I'm sure that can't be good for your self-esteem to have the whole region know that you are the worst of the lot. But even if there is a required starting point, fine. I still don't understand why I can't branch off from there. The whole region is basically just one big corridor anyway. The least they could do is try anything to make it feel a little less linear. I was already in Motostoke, so just let me go back and face Kabu. Speaking of, they specifically make mention that very few trainers make it past Kabu. The problem there is that it's only the 3rd gym. I can understand that battling may not be everybody's passion in this realm of Pokemon, but they also made it pretty clear that the Gym Challenge can only be done by people with a written endorsement. How are these people getting endorsed when they aren't even good enough to beat the 3 starting types? What, are parents just sending off their reluctant kids with a recommendation just to watch them fail? Because it seems like any old person can give it a whirl with that kind of failure rate. Essentially calling it a Gym Challenge is a joke, since apparently it's mostly wimps that sign up. Maybe that's why the gyms are cut off, because most people in Galar seem to be terrible Pokemon trainers, when really all they need to do is beef up the qualifications for getting in with one of those recommendations. I bet competent trainers would be just fine facing off against Pierce or Opal first. All they need to do is give us a chance. And maybe having beginners face off against and defeating other gym leaders could help impact the final ranking placements, so Milo wouldn't be stuck at the bottom all the time. Number 3. The Dex Limit. Look, obviously this is a horrendous revision in terms of gameplay, but it's possibly even worse in-universe. Pulling back the curtain a bit, I could see why they would want to ease the load on the number of Pokemon. As they've said, it's getting close to unsustainable. I mean, you wouldn't expect every single fighter in a Super Smash Bros. Game, plus new ones. That would be absurd. But by preventing hundreds of previously established Pokemon from not only being found in the region, but even transferable, it raises some questions about Galar. Namely, what sort of heinous, strict import laws are in place here? Was there some sort of unspeakable tragedy that happened thanks to an Alola Pokemon coming over that made them ban so many foreign-based creatures? Did someone bring over a fruit Pokemon when they weren't supposed to? Either the people in Galar have some serious hang-ups about non-native Pokemon, or they're just jerks. Because we know it can't be an environmental thing, since there are some Pokemon from every region in Galar, and we've already seen each of these Pokemon easily coexist in past regions with all of the others. And you can also trade for the non-Galarian forms of Pokemon, so even the ones that have adapted to their new climate to better survive are actually just fine the way they were to keep on going. So these restrictions have to be man-made. The only possible reasoning could be that the governing bodies simply won't allow certain Pokemon into their borders. But the only reasons for that would be they just feel like ignoring them? Somebody had to sit down and make the list of what to keep away. So was that just personal bias? Maybe they tried to whittle it down to what they thought would be the best candidates for competing in the Gym Challenge? But as we've already seen, that's a joke, and they clearly failed since they allowed in Cherim. Again, if it's a limitation for the Rotom Dex, in that its memory can't contain everything, then let's get it out of our hardware, because the Pokédex did better when we didn't have a ghost living in it. I honestly don't even know how Rotom keeps getting this job, since it's more forgetful than a Slowbro with amnesia. But even then, that shouldn't bar other Pokémon from even setting foot in the place. There is some hope on the horizon with new areas to explore, but frankly, there is no in-universe explanation for this radical shift. And if anything makes me question the basic logical consistency of a world I'm trying to use for a fun escape, it definitely turns out to be a big problem. Number 2. No culture. So, let me ask you something. Aside from being really into Pokemon battles, what is the culture of the Galar region all about? Because there are Pokemon battles literally everywhere else in the world, and just making them bigger doesn't mean it's unique. The problem is not lack of possibilities, it's the utter lack of any attempt to even portray these people as anything other than thoroughly modern. By this, I only mean that there are numerous spots around Galar that are screaming for deeper insight, but receive exactly 0% of the limelight. For starters, this image was one of the first that we saw of the Galar region. What mysteries would this ancient and sacred location hold? Was there some sort of new equivalent to the ruins of Alph nearby? Surely it had to be connected to a Pokemon from the region, maybe even some sort of legendary after the post-game. But no, none of that came about because you aren't even allowed to go there. Even if it's because they didn't want to disturb the site and let us walk all over it, that's fine, but at least let us go to the base of the mountain and meet up with a ruined maniac or something. But instead of getting a worthwhile backstory on the region's history, they turned it into a tourist spot. There's a similar lack of interest in Route 8, where you meander through a series of ruins with no explanation as to why they're still there. Why is there an ancient city right outside of Circhester? It's obviously important enough that they haven't completely gotten rid of it, but not so important that they were able to preserve it in any meaningful way. The truth is that we just don't know. There's crap like that all over the place that would make the region pretty interesting and unique if they bothered to explain it, but instead it's just there. It's no more than set dressing. What's this Dugtrio shrine all about? Who cares? You'll never find out. The only sort of history that's even hinted at is a couple of royals from a long time ago that stopped the Darkest Day, but we don't really learn any more about it for the entire journey. Even with studying cryptic hidden monuments and ancient tapestries, all we really learn is that there were 2 heroes that used the legendary wolf Pokemon to defeat the threat. But we could have guessed that from the beginning. It would have been pretty cool to find more hidden statues, or delve deeper into those tapestries to actually learn more about the past and know where this region came from. Britain has a rich history from which to draw, so it's sort of disappointing that we can't get the same in the Galar region. I get that maybe some people nowadays don't care about where they came from, but learning about the past has always been a fascinating and integral part of learning about a region. So telling us that there's not much there to worry about only reinforces that this place has no identity of which to speak, outside of the horrible role models that are Team Yell, or at the very least that Galar is historically insignificant, since obviously there's nothing to learn from their past. Number 1. Emptyness. This one really struck me as I was making my way through the Galar region. Pretty much right after coming out of your house, you get a gorgeous view over the land beyond, just waiting for you to run out and explore. However, once you get to looking at this promising view, after completing your quest, you can't help but notice it's nothing familiar to you in your journey. These lovely mountains off in the distance? They're just for show. You can take a train to the wild area, but then the high walls all around block you off from venturing anywhere else. It's basically a giant prison yard. Now, I'm not saying that it's reasonable to assume that we might be able to traverse every single mountain in the entire region, but it's a little hard for it not to be in the back of your mind as you look out longingly onto beautiful scenery that you can never reach. And it's not just limited to the outside either, since despite the size of some of the cities here, the options for indoor exploration are fairly limited. There are rows of buildings that you can't even enter. And while that is in no way distinct to the Galar region, they went out of their way to create huge, lavish, impressive-looking cities with their own unique landmarks that dominate the map. Forget about not being able to explore all of the neat protrusions in Hammerlock and other various castle structures that anywhere else would definitely have some nice hidden secrets, but even in regular areas there are houses that remain inaccessible, and the ones that you can go in are restricted to the ground floor. What has happened to hospitality when people won't even let strangers wander freely through their upstairs? Rude. But let's just look at the map. This region is pretty big. Maybe a little too big since they didn't bother using a fair amount of it. There's at least as much landmass around the first two towns as what makes up the first section of the wild area. So why can't we go explore it? Why can't we go to the coasts either? Are they overrun with Dynamax Pokémon or something? How hard would it have been to give us a little sand and surf? I know that we're getting the Isle of Armor, but we already know that's an entirely separate map. So what about all of the rest of the existing coastline? The only beach that we saw was freezing cold with snow everywhere. And speaking of snow, look up at the top of the map. Look at all of that ice up there. If that's not the Crown Tundra, why can't we visit any of it now? Sure, we could get lost, get frostbite, and starve to death if there's nothing of interest there, but shouldn't we get to decide that on our own? And look at all of the extra land around Winden that is going to waste. Why is it there if it's of no use? Aside from the literal blocks of unused buildings, there is just as much land up here as there was down in the wild area to begin with. But did nobody want a second wild area? There's only one tiny route cutting into it. In fact, the Galar region has the least amount of actual routes in any Pokemon region to date. And the region itself is just as big, if not bigger, than all of those other ones. So why are they so bad about letting us into that space? Even places that you can go that are visually stunning are similarly devoid of interaction. And times where they did include a little extra, like the factory on Route 3, we're unable to approach it. Like they don't just want kids strolling into an industrial site without supervision. And a separate point, but how come there aren't any caves? As we know, the Pokemon world is littered with caves well beyond reasonable geological probability. So how come there are only 2 man-made mines? Both relatively barren, by the way. I've noted lack of filling the space in other regions, but it is somehow at its worst here. At least Alola had the excuse of all the water, but when you drum up a bunch of hype about natural preservations untouched by man and call it the wild area, and then have vast swaths of unused land both on the map and visibly present the entire time, you really bring these nagging questions and general doubts upon yourself. So, those are my top 6 Pokemon problems with the Galar region. What issues do you have with Galar? Let me know down in the comments. Also be sure to leave a like, share this video, and subscribe so that you too can become an Imperial today. And we'll see you around next time!